The morning coffee in Dr. Emma Reed's cup went cold as she stared at the impossible readings on her computer screen. For 15 years, she had monitored radio signals from space at the Arecibo Observatory, hoping to find proof that humans were not alone in the universe. Today, that proof had found her instead. The signal was unlike anything in her database. It pulsed in mathematical sequences that no natural phenomenon could create. Prime numbers, followed by the Fibonacci sequence, then complex equations that described the structure of atoms. Someone or something was trying to talk to Earth, and they were speaking the universal language of science. Emma's hands shook as she reached for her phone to call the director. Before she could dial, every screen in the observatory lit up with the same message, now translated into dozens of human languages. Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. We come seeking peaceful contact with your species. Within hours, the news had spread across the globe. Every major government activated emergency protocols. Military bases went on high alert. Scientists abandoned their current projects to focus on the signals coming from beyond Earth's atmosphere. Religious leaders struggled to explain how this new reality fit into their teachings. The aliens called themselves the Kepler, and their first official communication came through every television, radio, and internet connection on the planet simultaneously. The being who appeared on screens worldwide looked almost human, but taller and thinner, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. My name is Ambassador Nora, speaking for the Kepler Alliance, the alien said, in perfect English, though her lips moved slightly out of sync with the words. We have been watching your world for many decades, waiting for the right moment to make contact. That moment has arrived because your species has reached a level of technology that makes this conversation possible. President Williams addressed the world from the White House emergency briefing room. This is the most important day in human history. We are not alone in the universe, and we have been invited to join a larger community of intelligent life. I want to assure everyone that our first priority is ensuring this contact remains peaceful and beneficial for all humanity. But even as world leaders spoke of peace and cooperation, military commanders were asking different questions. How many alien ships were there? What were their capabilities? Why had they been watching Earth for decades without revealing themselves? Dr. Reed found herself appointed to the hastily formed First Contact Committee, a group of scientists, diplomats, and military advisors tasked with managing humanity's response to the aliens. In the secure underground facility beneath Geneva, she worked around the clock to analyze every piece of data the Kepler shared. The aliens seemed genuinely friendly and helpful. They provided information about their home world, a planet orbiting a star 47 light-years from Earth. They shared basic scientific knowledge that could help humans develop cleaner energy and better medicine. They spoke of other intelligent species they had encountered and described a loose alliance of peaceful civilizations that spanned multiple star systems. Your species shows great promise, Ambassador Nora explained during one of their daily communications. In our observations, we have noted your remarkable ability to adapt and overcome challenges. Most species we encounter take thousands of years to develop what you have achieved in mere centuries. The compliment made Dr. Reed uncomfortable, though she could not explain why. There was something in the ambassador's tone that suggested the aliens found human development surprising rather than impressive. When she mentioned this concern to General Brooks, the military representative on the committee, he shared her unease. I've been thinking the same thing, Brooks said as they reviewed transcripts of alien communications. They keep mentioning how fast we develop technology, how quickly we adapt to change. It's like they're studying us rather than just talking to us. Dr. Reed pulled up the files containing humanity's responses to the first contact. Look at this data, Every question they ask is about our history, our conflicts, our technological development. They want to know about our wars, our weapons, our military strategies. That's not the kind of information you request from a species you're trying to befriend. Maybe they're just being careful, Brooks suggested. If you were making first contact with an unknown species, wouldn't you want to know if they were dangerous? The question hung in the air between them. If the Kepler were evaluating humanity's threat level, what conclusions were they reaching? And more importantly, what would they do if they decided humans were too dangerous to be trusted with advanced technology or contact with other alien species? Over the following weeks, more Kepler ships arrived in Earth's solar system. They maintained respectful distances from the planet, positioning themselves near the asteroid belt where their presence would not cause panic among Earth's population. But their numbers grew from the original 3 ships to more than 20, and long-range telescopes detected additional vessels approaching from deep space. Dr. Reed spent her days analyzing alien communications and her nights reviewing human history through alien eyes. The pattern she discovered was disturbing. Every question the Kepler asked, every piece of information they requested, seemed designed to assess humanity's capacity for violence and conquest. They wanted to know about the world wars, about nuclear weapons, about military technology. They asked detailed questions about human psychology, particularly about aggression, territorial behavior, and what they termed survival responses to resource scarcity. When Ambassador Nora inquired about human entertainment, she focused on war movies, action films, and competitive sports. She seemed fascinated by the concept of entertainment based on conflict and competition, noting that most species in the Kepler Alliance preferred collaborative forms of recreation. Your species appears to find conflict stimulating rather than distressing, the ambassador observed during one session. This is unusual in our experience. Most intelligent life forms develop strong psychological barriers against violence as they advance technologically. These barriers prevent the kind of self-destruction that ends many civilizations before they achieve interstellar travel. Dr. Reed felt a chill at the implications. Are you saying that most species avoid conflict altogether? Not avoid, but minimize. Violence is seen as a failure of communication, a breakdown in the systems that maintain social harmony. Species that cannot overcome their aggressive tendencies typically destroy themselves long before they develop the technology to leave their home worlds. That evening, Dr. Reed sat in her temporary quarters in Geneva, staring out at the lights of the city below. Somewhere above those lights, alien ships waited and watched. The question that kept her awake was simple, but terrifying. Were the Kepler preparing to welcome humanity into their alliance, or were they deciding whether humans were too dangerous to be allowed to survive? The abandoned warehouse in Detroit had been transformed into something that belonged in a science fiction movie. Massive holographic displays showed star charts of nearby systems, while alien technology hummed quietly in corners that had once stored automotive parts. Dr. Tom Wilson adjusted his tablet as he prepared for another day working alongside beings from another world. 3 months had passed since the Kepler had established permanent research stations on Earth. The cultural exchange program was proceeding, better than anyone had dared hope. Human scientists worked side by side with alien researchers, sharing knowledge that promised to revolutionize both civilizations. Medical breakthroughs that could eliminate cancer, energy systems that could end humanity's dependence on fossil fuels, and transportation technologies that could make interplanetary travel as common as flying across oceans. Tom's partner in the xenobiology research was a Kepler named Dr. Zara, whose specialty was comparative psychology across different species. Unlike Ambassador Nora's formal diplomatic manner, Zara was curious and talkative, eager to understand every aspect of human behavior and culture. "I have been studying your historical records," Zara said, as they calibrated a medical scanner that could analyze both human and Kepler biology. Your species fascinates me in ways that I struggle to explain to my colleagues back home. The speed of your technological development is unprecedented in our database of known civilizations. Tom looked up from his work. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Zara's large eyes seemed to study him carefully before she answered. Different, certainly. Most species we have encountered follow predictable patterns of development. They discover agriculture, develop writing systems, create basic tools, and then slowly progress through increasingly complex technologies over tens of thousands of years. But humans, she paused, accessing a holographic timeline that showed human technological advancement. You went from discovering electricity to landing on your moon in less than 200 years. The timeline was startling when viewed from an alien perspective. Human technological growth formed an exponential curve that looked almost vertical compared to the gradual slopes representing other alien civilizations. What caused this rapid development? Zara asked. Our anthropologists cannot identify the catalyst that accelerated your species beyond normal parameters. Tom thought about the question as he reviewed their data. I guess we've always been good at solving problems when we had to. Wars, natural disasters, competition for resources. They all forced us to innovate quickly or face extinction. Ah, Zara said, and Tom noticed her skin shift to a slightly different shade of blue, which he had learned indicated heightened interest or concern. You see challenges as motivations for advancement. Most species see them as obstacles to be avoided. Over the following days, Tom began to notice patterns in the questions Zara and other Kepler researchers asked. They were particularly interested in human responses to conflict and crisis. They studied World War II with intense focus, not because of the political implications, but because of the technological innovations it had produced. Radar, computers, jet engines, rocket technology, all developed under the pressure of military necessity. Your species created more new technologies during 6 years of global warfare than most civilizations develop in millennia of peaceful progress, Zara observed as they reviewed historical data. This pattern repeats throughout your history. Your greatest innovations emerge from your most desperate situations. Tom was beginning to understand why the aliens found humans so unusual. You're saying other species don't innovate under pressure? They adapt slowly, through careful planning and gradual change. The concept of revolutionary breakthrough technology developed in months or years rather than centuries is almost unknown among peaceful civilizations. Zara brought up examples from other worlds. The Hadari took 4,000 years to develop interplanetary travel after achieving nuclear fusion. The Neth took even longer, but humans went from first-powered flight to space travel in 66 years. The implications were starting to worry Tom. If humans were developing technology faster than any known species, what did that mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? And why were the Kepler so interested in human military history and crisis response capabilities? His concerns deepened when he gained access to reports from other research stations. At the Military Cooperation Facility in Colorado, Kepler observers had been studying human tactical doctrine and strategic planning. They were particularly fascinated by concepts like acceptable losses and strategic sacrifice, ideas that seemed to disturb them greatly. Colonel Martinez, the military liaison at that facility, reported that the aliens appeared shocked by human willingness to continue fighting, even when victory seemed impossible. They studied famous last stands throughout human history, Thermopylae, the Alamo, Stalingrad, with what he described as horrified fascination. At the Social Studies Center in London, Kepler anthropologists were analyzing human entertainment and culture. They seemed disturbed by the prevalence of conflict-based entertainment, action movies, war games, competitive sports, even children's toys that simulated combat. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the lead researcher there, noted that the aliens repeatedly asked why humans found competition and conflict entertaining rather than traumatic. Tom decided to ask Zara directly about these observations. Your people seem very interested in human military capabilities and our responses to conflict. Why is that? Zara was quiet for a long moment, her skin shifting through several colors that Tom had not seen before. Tom, I need you to understand something about the Kepler and most other spacefaring species. We evolved on worlds that were stable and peaceful. Our planets had abundant resources, stable climates, and few natural predators. Cooperation was not just beneficial for survival, it was essential. She brought up images of the Kepler home world, showing vast cities that seemed to grow organically from the landscape with no defensive structures or military installations visible anywhere. Conflict, for us, is an aberration, something that happens when communication fails or when mental illness affects individuals. We have not had a war in over 3,000 years. Most Kepler cannot even imagine deliberately harming another intelligent being. Tom stared at the peaceful alien cities. And humans? Humans evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, predators, resource scarcity, climate changes that could wipe out entire civilizations. You learn to fight not just other species, but your own environment. And when you encountered other humans competing for the same limited resources, she trailed off, her skin now a darker shade that Tom had learned indicated distress. You think we're dangerous, Tom said quietly. I think you are the most successful survivors in the known galaxy, Zara replied. The question that concerns my people is whether you can learn to be anything else. Every other species we have encountered had to choose between developing advanced technology and maintaining their aggressive instincts. The two seemed incompatible. Advanced weapons in the hands of violent species led to self-destruction. Tom felt a chill as he realized the implications. But humans developed both. Yes. You created weapons that could destroy your entire planet. And yet you did not destroy yourselves. You continued to develop more advanced technology while retaining all of your survival instincts. This has never been observed before. That night, Tom lay awake thinking about humanity from an alien perspective. What the Kepler saw as dangerous aggression, humans saw as necessary adaptation. What they viewed as disturbing military capability, humans considered essential preparedness. And what they found most frightening, humanity's ability to innovate under pressure, was exactly what had allowed the species to survive and thrive on a hostile planet. The question was whether the Kepler would see these traits as assets or threats when they decided humanity's fate. The coffee shop in downtown Sydney looked perfectly ordinary from the outside, but inside, history was being made over lattes and pastries. Dr. Lisa Chang sat across from her Kepler research partner, Dr. Kai, reviewing data that would change how both species understood each other forever. 6 months into the cultural exchange program, Lisa had been studying comparative sociology with the aliens, focusing on how different species organized their societies and resolved conflicts. What she discovered in the data files that morning made her stomach turn cold with dread. Kai, I need to ask you something directly, Lisa said, keeping her voice low despite the secure nature of their meeting location. When your people evaluate other species for potential inclusion in the Kepler Alliance, what criteria do you use? Kai's skin shifted to the pale shade that Lisa had learned indicated careful consideration. We assess technological development, social stability, and compatibility with alliance values of peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit. And if a species doesn't meet those criteria? The pause that followed lasted too long. Such species are typically isolated until they either develop the necessary social evolution or, Kai's skin went nearly white, or until they are no longer a concern. Lisa felt her heart racing. What does that mean exactly? Kai accessed his personal data pad and showed Lisa a star chart. 17 systems were marked with red symbols. These were civilizations that developed advanced military technology but retained aggressive social structures. They were quarantined to prevent them from threatening peaceful species. Quarantined how? Energy barriers were placed around their star systems, preventing any ships from leaving or entering. They were left to develop in isolation. Lisa stared at the chart, horrified. And if they tried to break through the barriers? Kai's skin went completely white. That has only happened 3 times. In each case, the species was deemed an existential threat to galactic civilization and was neutralized. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Lisa realized she was looking at a galactic map of genocide. Civilizations destroyed because they were considered too dangerous to exist alongside peaceful species. Kai, where does humanity fall on this evaluation? Scale? Her alien colleague was quiet for a long time, cycling through skin colors that indicated extreme stress. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Lisa, you must understand that the decision has not been made yet. The evaluation committee is still gathering data. But you have an opinion. Kai brought up holographic displays showing comparative analysis between humans and the destroyed civilizations. The similarities were terrifying. Advanced military technology, aggressive territorial behavior, rapid technological development, competitive social structures, and what the aliens termed high tolerance for violence in conflict resolution. The preliminary assessment is concerning, Kai admitted. Humans score higher on aggressive indicators than any species currently in the Alliance. You also score higher than 2 of the 3 civilizations that were eliminated as existential threats. Lisa felt the world spinning around her. So the Kepler are here to decide whether to destroy humanity? Not destroy. The evaluation committee hopes to find evidence that humans can evolve beyond their aggressive tendencies. That is why the Cultural Exchange Program exists, to determine if humanity can learn to function in a peaceful galactic community. Over the next few days, Lisa threw herself into research with desperate intensity. She accessed classified files from other research stations, interviewed human participants in the exchange program, and analyzed every piece of data the Kepler had shared about other civilizations. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Every species that had been neutralized shared key characteristics with humanity. They had all developed advanced weapons while retaining competitive social structures. They had all shown rapid technological advancement during periods of conflict. And they had all been evaluated by the same Kepler committee that was now studying Earth. Dr. Robert Kim, a psychologist working at the Beijing Research Station, provided additional disturbing information. The Kepler have been conducting psychological evaluations of human subjects, he reported during a secure video conference. They're particularly interested in our responses to hypothetical scenarios involving resource scarcity, territorial disputes, and existential threats. What kind of responses are they getting? Lisa asked. That's the problem. Even the most peaceful humans they've tested show what they consider unacceptably high levels of aggressive potential. They're shocked that ordinary people, teachers, doctors, artists, can contemplate using violence to protect their families or communities. Dr. Maria Santos from the Cultural Studies Center in Brazil added more troubling data. They've been analyzing human entertainment, literature, and art. They're disturbed by how much of our culture celebrates warriors, competitive achievement, and what they call glorification of conflict. They can't understand why we tell stories about heroes who fight against impossible odds instead of heroes who avoid conflict entirely. The most damning evidence came from General Thompson at the Military Cooperation Facility in Nevada. The Kepler observers have been studying our strategic planning procedures. They're horrified by our contingency planning, the fact that we prepare for conflicts that might never happen. When I explained that military doctrine requires preparing for worst-case scenarios, their reaction was... He paused, searching for words. They looked at me like I had just confessed to planning mass murder. Lisa realized that what humans considered prudent preparation, the aliens interpreted as evidence of inherently aggressive intent. Humanity's greatest strength, the ability to anticipate and prepare for challenges, was being evaluated as proof that they were too dangerous to be allowed to survive. The breakthrough came when Lisa gained access to historical files about previous Kepler evaluations. The 3 civilizations that had been eliminated were not destroyed because they actually threatened anyone. They were destroyed because the evaluation committee concluded they would eventually become threats if allowed to develop further. "Kai, I need to show you something," Lisa said during their next meeting. She had prepared a comprehensive analysis of the destroyed civilizations, comparing their actual behavior to their evaluated threat potential. "Look at the Vorthan Empire," she said, bringing up the historical data. "Your records showed they were eliminated because they had developed weapons capable of destroying planets and showed aggressive expansion tendencies. But they had never actually used those weapons against other species, and their expansion was into uninhabited systems." Kai studied the data with growing unease. They were deemed a preemptive threat based on capability and psychological profile. Exactly. They were destroyed not for what they had done, but for what the evaluation committee thought they might do. Lisa brought up the other 2 cases. Same pattern here. Species with advanced military capabilities and competitive cultures. Eliminated before they could supposedly threaten peaceful civilizations. Lisa, you must understand that the committee makes these decisions to protect billions of lives across dozens of worlds. I understand that the committee is afraid of species that are different from them, Lisa replied, and fear is making them eliminate potential friends instead of actual enemies. Lisa spent the rest of the day preparing a presentation that she hoped would save humanity from the fate of the previous 3 civilizations. But as she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was already too late. The evaluation committee had likely already reached their preliminary conclusions about humanity. The question was whether anything she could say or do would be enough to convince them that humans were worth the risk of keeping alive. The emergency alarm in the International Space Station cut through the peaceful morning like a knife. Commander David Park floated quickly to the communications panel, where urgent messages were flooding in from ground control. Something had gone catastrophically wrong with the cultural exchange program, and Earth was about to face its greatest crisis since first contact. The incident had started as a routine test of a new satellite tracking system developed jointly by human and Kepler engineers. The satellite was designed to monitor space debris and prevent collisions with the growing number of alien ships in Earth's orbit. But when the tracking system activated, it automatically locked onto the nearest large object, a Kepler research vessel conducting atmospheric studies above the Pacific Ocean. The lock-on lasted only 3 seconds before human controllers realized the error and shut down the system. The satellite's tracking beam was harmless, designed only to gather data about orbital objects, but the Kepler response was immediate and extreme. Within minutes, every Kepler ship in the solar system had activated defensive shields and moved to high alert status. Ambassador Nora's emergency transmission to world leaders carried a tone of barely controlled panic that no human had ever heard from the normally calm alien diplomat. "Your military systems have targeted our peaceful research vessel," she announced, during an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council. "This unprovoked act of aggression confirms our worst fears about human intentions." President Williams tried to explain that it was clearly an accident, a malfunction in an automated system that was designed to protect both human and alien spacecraft from dangerous debris. But the more he tried to clarify the situation, the more agitated the Kepler became. "You test weapons systems that can engage targets in orbit?" Ambassador Nora asked, her skin shifting to colors that the human xenobiologists had never seen before. And you call this routine? It's not a weapons system, General Morrison interjected. It's a safety system designed to track and catalog objects in space to prevent accidental collisions. A system that can identify, target, and lock onto our vessels without warning or permission, Nora replied. How is this different from a weapons targeting system? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Commander Park, watching the exchange from orbit, realized the fundamental problem. What humans saw as a sensible precaution, knowing where objects were in space to avoid hitting them, the Kepler interpreted as a military threat assessment system. Dr. Wilson from the Detroit Research Station joined the emergency conference via secure link. Ambassador, perhaps we can establish better communication protocols to prevent future misunderstandings. We could share our satellite tracking data with your ships to ensure they're aware of our monitoring activities. Share your surveillance. Data? Ambassador Nora's skin went through a rapid cycle of colors that suggested extreme agitation. Dr. Wilson, your species maintains tracking systems that can locate any object within millions of kilometers of your planet. You have contingency plans for conflicts in space, on other worlds, in dimensions that do not exist. You prepare for wars that have never been declared against enemies you have never met. The accusations came in a flood that revealed how deeply the Kepler had studied human military doctrine and strategic planning. They had discovered that human military leaders routinely developed battle plans for hypothetical scenarios, including conflicts with alien species, battles in zero gravity, and even warfare using technologies that hadn't been invented yet. Strategic. Planning is standard procedure for any military organization, Admiral Chen explained. We prepare for unlikely scenarios so we'll be ready if they ever occur. Ready to fight wars that may never happen? Ambassador Nora's voice rose to frequencies that hurt human ears. This level of paranoid aggression is beyond anything we have encountered in our interactions with 43 intelligent species. Commander, Park realized that the cultural exchange program had exposed a fundamental incompatibility between human and Kepler psychology. Humans planned for worst-case scenarios because they had learned that being unprepared could lead to extinction. The Kepler, who had evolved in a peaceful galaxy where conflict was rare, saw such planning as evidence of aggressive intent. The situation deteriorated further when Admiral Chen mentioned that human naval doctrine included protocols for protecting Earth from potentially hostile alien invasions. The Kepler delegation fell silent, and their skin colors shifted to patterns that human observers had never seen before. You have detailed plans for fighting us, Ambassador Nora said, her voice now cold and formal. Even as we share our technology and knowledge, you prepare for war against us. We have contingency plans for many scenarios that we hope will never occur, President Williams said carefully, including natural disasters, asteroid impacts, and yes, potential conflicts with unknown entities. This doesn't mean we want these things to happen. But the explanation only made things worse. The Kepler couldn't understand how a species could simultaneously engage in peaceful cooperation while maintaining detailed plans for violent conflict. To them, it suggested a level of deception and duplicity that made humans fundamentally untrustworthy. Dr. Chang joined the emergency session from her location in Australia, bringing disturbing news from her research partner. Ambassador, I've been working with Dr. Kai for months, and I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding about human nature. Your evaluation committee is interpreting our preparedness as aggression, but they're missing the context. What context? Ambassador Nora asked. Humans evolved on a planet that was constantly threatening their survival. Natural disasters, climate changes, resource scarcity, predators. Everything on Earth was trying to kill us. We learned to prepare for dangers not because we're warlike, but because unpreparedness meant extinction. Dr. Chang brought up holographic displays showing Earth's geological and climate history. Look at the data your own scientists have collected. Earth has experienced mass extinction events, ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts. that would have wiped out most species. Humans survived by learning to anticipate and prepare for catastrophic events. But even this explanation seemed to disturb the Kepler rather than reassure them. Ambassador Nora consulted with advisors whose presence confirmed human suspicions that this was no longer just a cultural exchange. Dr. Chang, you are describing a species that has been shaped by constant warfare against their own environment. You have weaponized survival itself, turning defensive instincts into aggressive capabilities. This makes you more dangerous, not less. Commander Park watched from orbit as the conversation spiraled toward disaster. Below him, Kepler ships were repositioning themselves into what looked suspiciously like battle formations. Long-range sensors detected more alien vessels approaching from deep space. Not the peaceful research ships that had characterized the exchange program, but larger, more heavily armed craft. The final blow came when General Morrison tried to demonstrate human peaceful intentions by explaining that most of Earth's military forces were actually engaged in humanitarian missions, disaster relief, peacekeeping, medical aid, and infrastructure development in regions affected by natural disasters or conflicts. Your military forces engage in combat operations to impose peace? Ambassador Nora asked, her skin now cycling through colors that human observers found deeply disturbing. You use weapons to create stability. You employ violence to establish order. Sometimes force is necessary to protect innocent people from those who would harm them, General Morrison explained. You have convinced yourselves that violence serves peace, Ambassador Nora replied. This is the most dangerous philosophy we have ever encountered. Species that believe their aggression serves higher purposes are the ones most likely to justify expanding that aggression beyond their own worlds. Commander Park realized that humanity was facing judgment by beings who had never experienced the harsh realities that shaped human civilization. The Kepler lived in a galaxy where peace was natural and conflict was aberrant. They couldn't understand a species that had learned to use controlled violence to prevent greater violence, or that planned for worst-case scenarios to ensure their survival. As the emergency session ended with no resolution, Park watched the Kepler fleet assume positions that could only be described as a siege formation around Earth. Humanity's first contact with alien civilization was about to become their last contact with anyone. The underground conference room beneath the Pentagon had been hastily converted into a command center for what might be humanity's final diplomatic effort. Secretary of State Helen Martinez watched the holographic display showing over 300 Kepler ships now surrounding Earth in a formation that could only be called a blockade. 3 days had passed since the satellite incident, and long-range sensors detected even more alien vessels approaching from deep space. The message that had arrived that morning made the situation clear. Humanity was being placed under quarantine, pending a final evaluation by the Kepler High Council. Earth would be isolated from the rest of the galaxy until the aliens decided whether humans posed an existential threat to peaceful civilizations. Ambassador Nora materialized in the center of the room via holographic projection, flanked by figures that humans had never seen before. The Kepler High Council, whose presence confirmed that this was no longer a diplomatic mission, but a judicial proceeding. The evaluation period has concluded, Nora announced without preamble. The High Council has reviewed all data collected during our interactions with humanity. The evidence is overwhelming that your species represents an unprecedented risk to galactic civilization. The lead counselor, an ancient-looking Kepler whose skin showed patterns of deep blue and silver, stepped forward. I am High Counselor Rex, speaking for the collective judgment of 43 member species of the Kepler Alliance. In our database of over 200 civilizations we have encountered, none have exhibited the combination of advanced military capability, aggressive psychology, and rapid technological development that characterizes humanity. President Williams leaned forward. Counselor Rex, we understand your concerns, but you're judging us based on preparations for scenarios we hope never to face. Humans prefer peace, but we prepare for conflict because our history has taught us that unpreparedness leads to suffering. Your history is exactly what concerns us, another counselor replied. In the past century alone, your species has engaged in global warfare that killed over 100 million beings. You developed weapons capable of destroying your entire planet. You consider this progress. Dr. Chang, who had been flown in specifically for this final session, stood from her position at the advisory table. Counselors, with permission, I believe. You're missing crucial context about human development. High Counselor Rex nodded for her to continue. You keep referring to human violence and military capabilities as aberrations, but they're actually adaptive responses to environmental pressures that your species never experienced, Dr. Chang began, activating displays that showed comparative planetary data. Look at the worlds where your member species evolved. Stable climates, abundant resources, few natural predators, minimal geological activity. The displays showed peaceful worlds with gentle landscapes and calm weather patterns, nothing like the volcanic, storm-swept, constantly changing environment of Earth. Now compare that to Earth, Dr. Chang continued. Mass extinctions, ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, constant climate shifts, resource scarcity, and predators that could kill humans with ease. Any species that survived on Earth would develop the same traits you find disturbing in humanity. The ability to adapt quickly, to plan for disasters, and yes, to fight when necessary. Secretary Martinez stood to support Dr. Chang's argument. Counselors, you describe human military planning as paranoid aggression, but consider the alternative. Every time in human history when we failed to prepare for conflict, the result was massive suffering. We learned to prevent wars by being ready for them. You prevent wars by preparing for them? High Counselor Rex's skin shifted to colors that suggested deep skepticism. This logic is incomprehensible to us. Peaceful species prevent wars by avoiding the conditions that create conflict. That works when you live in a peaceful galaxy, General Morrison interjected. But Earth taught us that sometimes conflict finds you whether you want it or not. Natural, disasters, resource scarcity, territorial disputes. We learned to handle these challenges through controlled applications of force, rather than allowing them to escalate into greater violence. The counselors conferred among themselves in rapid color changes that human observers had learned to interpret as intense debate. When they finished, High Counselor Rex spoke with obvious reluctance. Even accepting your environmental context, the evaluation committee has identified a fundamental incompatibility. Your species has weaponized adaptation itself. You turn every challenge into an opportunity for technological advancement, every conflict into a catalyst for innovation. This makes you dangerously unpredictable. Dr. Chang realized this might be humanity's last chance to make their case. Counselor, that same adaptability could be humanity's greatest gift to your alliance. You've encountered 43 species, all from stable, peaceful worlds. What happens when your alliance faces a crisis that requires the kind of rapid innovation and adaptive thinking that humans excel at? Such crises are extremely rare in civilized space, another counselor replied. But they do occur, Dr. Chang pressed. Your own records show that 3 previous species had to be eliminated because they became threats to alliance worlds. What if, instead of destroying those civilizations, you had found a way to redirect their aggressive capabilities toward protecting peaceful species rather than threatening them? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Secretary Martinez seized the moment. Counselors, humanity doesn't want to conquer the galaxy. We want to protect it. Our military capabilities, our strategic planning, our rapid innovation, all of these could serve as a shield for peaceful civilizations against genuinely hostile forces. You're asking us to trust the galaxy's most dangerous predators to become its protectors, High Counselor Rex said slowly. President Williams stood, his voice carrying the weight of speaking for an entire species. We're asking you to see that the qualities that make us dangerous to enemies could make us valuable to friends. Every human soldier, every strategic planner, every weapon designer, they all took an oath to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Dr. Chang brought up historical examples on the holographic display. Look at human peacekeeping missions, disaster relief operations, humanitarian interventions. Yes, we use force, but we use it to protect the innocent from those who would harm them. We've learned to channel our aggressive instincts toward defensive purposes. The Kepler counselors engaged in another rapid discussion, their skin colors, shifting through patterns that suggested intense disagreement among them. Finally, a new voice spoke, a counselor whose ancient appearance suggested extreme age and authority. I am Elder Counselor Vex, and I have observed the rise and fall of civilizations for over 2,000 years, the figure said. The human argument has merit, but it requires trust that no previous evaluation committee has been willing to grant. The risk of being wrong about human intentions could result in the destruction of everything we have built. The risk of being wrong about human potential could cost you the protection you might someday need, Dr. Chang replied. Elder Counselor, what happens when your alliance encounters a threat that can't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or avoided? What happens when peaceful solutions aren't enough? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Kepler Alliance represented. These were beings who had built their entire civilization on the assumption that intelligence and cooperation could solve any problem. The idea that some problems might require the application of controlled violence was fundamentally alien to their worldview. Elder Counselor Vex was quiet for a long moment before responding. Dr. Chang, you are describing scenarios that the Alliance has worked for millennia to prevent. We eliminate aggressive species precisely so that such threats cannot arise. But you can't eliminate every potential threat in the galaxy, General Morrison said. There are billions of star systems, countless worlds where life could evolve. Sooner or later, you're going to encounter something that your peaceful approach can't handle. When that happens, wouldn't you rather have allies who know how to fight than friends who only know how to run? Secretary Martinez stepped forward with humanity's final offer. Counselors, we propose a probationary membership in your alliance. Place observers on our worlds, monitor our development, set strict limitations on our military expansion, but give us the chance to prove that humans can be the galaxy's guardians rather than its destroyers. And if you prove us wrong? High Counselor Rex asked. Then you'll be in position to stop us before we become a real threat, President Williams replied. But if we prove you right, you'll have gained the strongest allies you could ever hope. 4. The Kepler delegation withdrew for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When they returned, Elder Counselor Vex spoke for the group. The High Council has reached a decision. Humanity will be granted provisional status within the Kepler Alliance, subject to unprecedented monitoring and restrictions. Your expansion beyond this solar system will be limited and supervised. Your military development will be regulated and directed toward defensive applications only. Any sign of aggressive expansion or threat to Alliance members will result in immediate quarantine and potential elimination. Dr. Chang felt relief wash over her, but Elder Counselor Vex wasn't finished. However, humanity will also be granted a unique role within the Alliance. You will serve as our defensive specialists, our crisis response experts, he paused, searching for the right term. Our warriors when warriors are needed. It is our hope that this role will never be necessary, but should threats arise that exceed peaceful solutions, humanity will be expected to stand as protectors of civilized space. President Williams nodded solemnly. We accept these terms, Elder Counselor. Humanity will prove worthy of your trust. As the Kepler ships began to withdraw from their siege positions, Dr. Chang realized that first contact had ended not with humanity joining a peaceful alliance, but with them being recruited as the galaxy's reluctant police force. It wasn't the future anyone had imagined, but it was a future where humans could use their dangerous gifts to protect rather than threaten. The stars were finally open to humanity, but they came with the greatest responsibility any species had ever been asked to bear, being strong enough to protect the innocent while being wise enough not to become the very thing they were meant to guard against. Standing in the Pentagon Command Center, watching alien ships disappear into the darkness of space, Dr. Chang understood that humanity's greatest test was still ahead of them. They had convinced the galaxy that they could be trusted with power. Now they had to prove they could be trusted with restraint.